We have Dr. Andy McCoy with us. He is a senior water resource engineer with HDR in the Des Moines office. He is one of the, or I would say probably the local expert, probably national expert in fluid mechanics and computational modeling for surface water. He is also a founding member of Break the Cycle, which is a bike ride that occurs once a year in the summer, usually goes from Des Moines to Okoboji, and it's 200 miles long, and the purpose of it is to spread awareness for human trafficking. So with that, oh, you also have a hashtag on social media, Fluid Mechanics in the Wild, so you
Yeah.
gotta search up that hashtag.
Fluid Mechanics in the Wild.
Yes. So with that, thanks for joining me today, Andy.
Well, thanks for having me. I think it'll be. I'm looking forward to having some good discussion with you. So.
Yeah. So first off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you grew up, what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Yeah. So I grew up in the country, near, kind of in between Adel, Van Meter, and Waukee, if for those of you around central Iowa. And so I went to Adel High School. Is where I went, and I would say that the fact that I grew up in the country, in the woods, with a medium-sized creek and stream behind my home may have influenced who I am and the professional choices I've made today, because I look back on it now, and I know that I had an outdoor laboratory that I would use to, I was just a kid that was curious, but I would go routinely during thunderstorms. I would go and see what was happening down at the creek and see how high the water was getting and if it was flooding and what would change after. I would be very excited if one of the bends in the stream got cut off, or there was some big change that happened. And over a period of probably a decade, I would say, I was kind of an intense stream watcher, and I always loved science and earth science and things. And as I started to think about career choices, I think my mom may have said, well, civil engineering is all about, it's all about manipulating the earth or knowing more about how the world works, and then designing things to function within that system. And so I started looking into civil engineering and started thinking towards the end of high school, yeah, engineering this looks like a really good idea. And for me, I went to the University of Iowa and started to see they have some of the faculty members that do research in hydraulics and water resources and fluids. And they started talking about some of the projects they were working on. And I thought, this will be a great career choice for me. And so that's, University of Iowa, got a bachelor's degree. Then I worked for a couple years in Austin, Texas for a company called HDR. And then I stopped, went back to the University of Iowa for graduate school, got a master's and a doctorate. And then when I started looking for careers after grad school, I just remembered really enjoying my time at HDR and knowing that there's so many different clients that needed computational hydraulics or two-dimensional or three-dimensional hydraulic modeling, that the consulting world in like 2005, typically there was boutique firms that were doing that kind of modeling, but some of the larger AE firms weren't doing a lot of that kind of work. And I just knew that there would be a spot to be able to create a practice within a company because there were so many clients that needed it. And so I talked to the people I used to work with at HDR and said, hey, looking to come out, when I started looking for a job after grad school. Remember, there was a lot of choices. My wife was trying to find a faculty job somewhere, and I was looking for jobs. And there was a lot of opportunities in California and the Pacific Northwest, and there was opportunities on the East Coast, but we didn't overlap very well. And I just I think we got tired, and we thought, why not Des Moines, Iowa? We love it. We're from here, and we're probably going to have a family really soon, and our parents are still around here, and so both of us said, let's 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 focus on Des Moines and see what we can pull off. And HDR at the time had an office of 2 people, and I think they were thrilled that I wanted to be in Des Moines because they were looking to grow the office, and so that worked out really well. And then my wife has a faculty job now at Drake University, so which is in Des Moines also. So that's
Okay.
maybe a long-winded intro and a little background.
No, not at all. So when you started working at HDR, did you with the computational modeling, was that something that you created that department, or was that something that was in place?
Well, part one, when I went to work in Austin, Texas, I had a general civil engineering background, an interest in water resources, but I didn't have like the computational skills that you would gain doing 5 years of graduate school. So I knew I had an interest and started working in the consulting world. And yeah, they focused in Austin, they focused a lot more on water supply. Some parts of the state of Texas have water shortages and others have a water surplus, and they have a water rights system where you can't just take water out of a stream. You have to have legal right to do that. And so a city like San Antonio needs to, if they want to develop more water resources for the people that live in San Antonio, or if they want to grow, they have to spend a lot of, they have to figure out how the best way to do that is, and probably the lowest economic cost for their utilities to be able to do that. So I was involved in the modeling of those types of water resources, but I knew long term I wanted to be a little bit more in the modeling of the like river mechanics or moving river flows or flood flows or flood interest, and not so less in the water rights and more in the rivers realm of the physical part of rivers and the flooding aspects of it.
So getting back to your earlier days of watching storm events.
And in Des Moines, I would say we always have had like a water resources group, but nobody was doing 2-dimensional hydraulic modeling or CFD modeling applied to the types of projects that you might do as a consulting engineer. And so that was kind of a new aspect for our company. So for our group in Iowa and Omaha, in Iowa, Nebraska, and then also for our company nationally as well.
Okay. So is that the reason why you went to pursue your doctorate as well, was to get the computational skills?
It was, but I didn't have an end goal in mind. I didn't think, oh, I will get this doctorate and I will go straight into academia, or I will earn this doctorate and I will go into the research world or consulting. I just knew that I wanted to keep driving further and deeper into the technical parts of my career. And I think I knew enough from the consulting world. I knew enough to know that I knew enough to be dangerous, but I really didn't understand the limits of what were in the field. And so I kind of cut tie. I mean, when I went to grad school, I went all in. I went for the reasons I just wanted to understand, and I thought research was fun. I liked learning about the cutting edge, and 5 years later, I ended up right back at the same company that I had left, but with a completely different perspective on what sort of value I could bring to the clients and the cities and just the different people out there that have floods and water problems and hydraulics problems.
Sure. I think that's super like interesting too, because when you're describing about when you were a kid and, you know, going down the backyard and seeing what happens with flood events, and then how it came full circle with getting your doctorate and doing what you do now at HDR, and then also tying that in like one of your favorite hobbies, which is biking.
Yeah.
So tying that into riding bikes to check out rivers and streams. So I guess with that, maybe if we could switch gears a little bit, and if you could talk about something that you're passionate about.
So yeah, some of the things that some of the things I'm passionate about. I mean, and you talked a little bit about the nonprofit that I formed with a group of friends, where we had done a 1-day 200-mile bike ride, and like in 2011. And I remember after we were done, people thought it was crazy that we did it, and so we started talking about doing it again. But it we thought, if we do this again, it's just going to be, it's really not, what would drive us to do something like that again. And then we started talking about different, if we could tie the day-long suffering with a cause that we were passionate about, then that might be a good reason to do the event again and invite other people along with us. And so with some of our cycling, it was kind of a combination of some church friends and cycling friends that we said, let's do a 1-day 200-mile bike ride again, and let's do it to raise money to support survivors of human trafficking. And so when people would say, why on earth would you ride your bike 200 miles in one day? We tell them, we're doing it because we're going to suffer one day on a bike so that we can raise money and awareness to support people that have really had that have been taken advantage of for many years. And we're going to raise money so they can go into a shelter home or a place of restoration, or in some way help them. And so that's one area that I've been passionate about. And what is that? We're almost at $1 million in fundraising. We've done the Break the Cycle 200 ride now for 8 years, where we've done fundraising. And so that kind of combines a lot of my interests and passions into one thing. So that's like a good theme. If you can start to get multiple, like biking, I like living out the gospel as a Christian, and that's a really easy way to do it. I mean, it's not easy, but it's a way that combines my physical passions and talents and gifting with spiritual ones, and it's a good way to do that. Another thing that I'm passionate about is just being involved in the community. And what's that mean? Sometimes, I've been on the board of our local neighborhood association in the East Village in Des Moines, and sometimes people think, well, why would I want to be on the board, or why should I volunteer for something like that? And the real easy answer is that so many people today just say no to everything, but there's actually very few people that'll just say, yes, I can help. And it doesn't mean that you have to be the most perfect board member or 95% attendance or something, but if you can be committed to a part of like an organization like that, you can help move things forward and help in the way that you're passionate about. So neighborhood association, and then another group that that I'm a part of and on the board is called Friends of Des Moines Parks. And so that's kind of a fundraising special projects for Des Moines Parks and Rec. It's a way to funnel some private monies in to support what Des Moines Parks and Rec has going. And so again, that's kind of like biking and recreation. And Des Moines Parks and Rec does a really good job they have a lot of programs like every kid gets a ball, and making sure that there's parks and places for people to go all over the city of Des Moines, no matter what part of town you live in, or no matter what your economic background or your ethnic background is. Des Moines Parks and Rec is serving all residents of Des Moines, and so that's another really I'm passionate about. That I think growing up, I had just we owned the land. I mean, my parents owned the land, but I wouldn't be the person I am today without having abundance of recreation and wild space and green space to kind of get lost in. So that's, again, I guess it's another combination of a couple different places in my life. So
Yeah, I like the tie. Like, I feel like your break the cycle work and with the Park and Rec department, a tie in for, trying to be a voice for people whose voices maybe aren't heard, and being an advocate for people that really need advocates. So one question that came up when you were talking about your break the cycle work. So this is the bike ride that takes how many hours? How many hours does it take for
I think one year we had an amazing tailwind, and we rode from Des Moines to Okoboji, and we were pushed the whole way there. And then we left at 5 a.m, and we made it to Okoboji by 4:45 in the afternoon. And then this year, because of the pandemic, we split our group into groups of 6 and stayed on the Raccoon River Valley Trail, which, about every mile there's a gravel road, or at least a crossing where you kind of have to slow down and make sure you're not going to get hit. And so, speeds are quite a bit slower. And so I think we started at 5 a.m. I think the last group was finished maybe about 8 p.m. So
Okay.
15 hours. We stop every 25 miles and try to take, like a 30-minute break for lunch.
Okay. So what thoughts go through your head, when things are getting tough? Because that's a really, really long time. Like, for me, it's a long time to ride for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So I can't even imagine what 15 hours is like. But what are the thoughts that go through your head?
We've just remember why you're doing it. And some years were better than others, but we, as a leadership group, we always try to take some time in the morning and in the afternoon. Like, just when we've been a group of 50, we've had kind of okay, we're going to be absolutely quiet for 10 minutes, because it's in a group of 50, there's people that are just, there's a lot of people that are talking, and people will have, the togetherness helps kind of pull people through. But we like to spend time just, hey, there's 10 minutes, it's going to be silent. And so if you want to think about what we're doing, or if you want to pray about what we're doing, or all the things, now's the time to do that. And so that's more of a formal situation with both morning and then at afternoon. But yeah, it's just, think of someone in Nepal who, by no fault of their own, was just born into the wrong caste, and their family already had a lot of kids, and it's just hard to feed that many people. And so sometimes a young woman has cash value on being sold, and that's a reality that it's not hard to think about how wrong that is. And so then just think about it. You don't have to dwell on that. It's just think about that and remind yourself, as it's hot, or your legs hurt, or your tailbone hurts, or same thing. Girl has a tough home life here in Des Moines, runs away from home and needs shelter, and someone's willing to offer it. Oh yeah, I've got, you can stay with me. But then there's a slippery slope into being sold, and on a nightly basis. And it's, again, that it's through no fault of their own, it's just unfortunate circumstances. And so that it doesn't yeah, you just think about some of those things, and it'll just keep the pedals turning 90 RPMs.
Well, I commend you guys, all of you, for doing that, for providing resources so that these people can be loved appropriately and removed from situations where it's not safe and they're being dehumanized. So I totally commend you guys for raising money and for doing uncomfortable things to help other people. That's super inspiring. And I think, is there a race going? Can you talk about that? A race that's actually going on today, right?
Yeah, today's actually the Break the Cycle 200 Minneapolis. And so the event is it's going on right now in Minneapolis. And so I've never done the Minneapolis version, but I think it's the 4th year for the Minneapolis event. And later in September we have one in Nashville. And so I know they're all socially distanced as appropriate, maybe groups of 6 to 10 people, something like that. That's kind of what we thought. And then no big group, try to keep the groups kind of spread out or whatever, just to make sure we don't, become super spreaders or whatever of the pandemic that's going on. So
Yes, safety first.
mm-hmm.
Okay, so who is one person that inspires you?
We have, I'm trying to think of a good, I'm inspired by, I probably have a few. It's hard for me to say like the most inspiring or something like that, but I know this is going to sound a little cheesy, but my wife inspires me in that she's an artist and a small business owner and a faculty member, and she never loses sight of when she's doing work for clients. She never loses sight of the customer, like the client focus, and making sure that she can achieve the design that she knows they're going to want, even if they're not asking for it. And that's a particularly inspiring thing for those of us in consulting, because it's challenging to get. Sometimes the client, they know what they want, they think they know what they want, and maybe I might think about, maybe in a broader point of view, and with all, no disrespect, but what they might need and how to get there a different way. And it's always been a challenge for me to figure out how to do that. And so that's one. My wife, Sarah McCoy, she inspires me. And then I have my graduate, one of my graduate advisors. He was probably Larry Weber, Dr. Larry Weber. He's in charge of the Iowa Flood Center, or he was the co-founder, and now I think he's moved on to a few other things. But I was always inspired by the fact that he's the best communicator I think I've ever been around. He can, in an academic setting, in a research talk, he can provide the details that the academics and the researchers want, but he's also just as comfortable and communicates just as well and in the same language in a public meeting in rural Iowa, or in like a group of like a watershed group where they're starting to talk about what sort of watershed practices to install. And I saw him do that on a number of, in graduate school, you watch that because you do presentations and conferences. And so you see it's a whole different level of communication that's required. But you have to be aware of your surroundings and know who you're talking to and what sort of information is relevant to them. And so I was drawn, I mean, that's one of the reasons that I chose the University of Iowa for graduate school, because I wanted to work and be part of his research group. So.
Yeah, and that's so cool, and such a special skill set to be able to take super complex issues and concepts and then boil it down to something that's simple and relatable and understandable for everyone, no matter who the audience is, I guess. So it's not easy to do, is it? So that's cool. All right. Well, that is all I have for questions. So thanks for joining me today, and have a good rest of your day.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been fun, and good luck with your project.